Chris Gilmour from Absa Stockbrokers joins me now to unpack the numbers just a little bit further. It's always lovely to have you, Chris. And the key theme, and this is what everybody's reporting about when it comes to these numbers, is that Pick n Pay is getting leaner. It's a much leaner machine that we're seeing. But are they actually winning market share? Are they actually taking the fight to their competitors in the market?
Nausea, in fact, no, they're not. In fact, they're actually going in the other direction. They're still losing market share, albeit at a slower pace, shall we say. I mean, if you look at the ShopRite numbers that came out recently, way ahead of this. I mean, we're talking about here revenue growth up 6% or thereabouts. If you strip out inflation, or should I say, if we strip out new stores, we're talking 3.6%. So yes, they're probably still losing market share. But if you listen to Richard Brasher, I don't think that phases them too much. What they're talking about is slimming down. You're quite right. A couple of years ago, he put it very nicely. He said, we're cutting down on the pies. You know, so they're becoming a leaner, cleaner, meaner operation. Having said all of that, there is a limit to what you can do in terms of cutting down costs and becoming more streamlined. Because at some point in time, and your point is very, very germane, you have to start winning back market share and profitable market share from your competitors. And in an environment where the broad middle class, which is where they're pandering to basically, is being squeezed mercilessly and remorselessly, it's going to be increasingly difficult to actually do that.
One of the things you spoke about in that analysis right at the get-go was the new stores. We're told that they're looking at efficiency over just number of stores. We had 40 stores closed, although there were a couple of new stores, I think, in the region of 127. Again, how does this change Pick n Pay as we know it, and what does this mean for the look and feel of Pick n Pay going forward for the consumer?
For the consumer, I think not an awful lot of change. You know, if you look at a typical Pick n Pay store, it's very clean. They put a lot of store by, no pun intended, by having very, very clean stores that invite the consumer to come in. And I think they do like to give the consumer a good shopping experience. You only have to go down to the one in the nickel, for example, to see exactly what we're talking about there. So I think that will carry on. I mean, things like the smart shopper experience, you know, where you feel like you're really getting something back after you've paid your hard-earned cash across that. So this type of thing, making it a more pleasant experience. You know, if you look around and do a critical analysis of the actual prices that are charged by Pick n Pay and Spar and ShopRite, yes, there will be differences in certain categories, but across the board, there's not a great deal of difference between all of them. So how do you differentiate? You differentiate by making the shopping experience that much more pleasant. And in that broad middle class, I think that's important.
What about the lower segment? We know that they're trying to punch their weight there with the Boxer stores, yes. Against no pun intended there, and they're trying to position Boxer as a national brand. Is it working? Is it going to be an effective way of winning that part of that segment of the market?
I think it could be. I mean, they've been predominantly in the KZN and Eastern Cape, so I think expanding it into the broader part of South Africa, I think could well be a good idea. But bear in mind, that is a particularly difficult space in which to operate, because, I mean, ShopRite, with USave, they've been there for a long, long time. It's very, very tough indeed. Look, Boxer has been a good operation for quite some time, so I would say the chances are better than fair, but it will be tough, make no mistake.
There have been a couple of markets where they've gotten their fingers burnt outside the borders of South Africa, Mozambique being one of them, Mauritius being another one. Yes. Talk to us about their Africa strategy and whether that's paying off, and what is it about Mozambique and Mauritius that seems to be hammering Pick n Pay?
Yeah, Mozambique and Mauritius, they've closed those ones down, and you see it in the results. The franchise fee actually came down a bit. Difficult markets in which to operate. Mozambique, I think you've got a lot of informal traders there, particularly. Mauritius, more difficult to get your mind around that one. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. If you look at where they are in the rest of Africa, you know, they've actually done remarkably well. It's still small, and particularly relative to the likes of ShopRite or Massmart, for example. But I think you were looking at revenue up 13.6% in the rest of Africa. You're looking at the margin up to 5.1 from 4.3. Now you compare that margin with what they've got down here, 1.9. So you can see a much higher profit margin, and that's going to be a key differentiator, I think, going forward. They are small in Africa. They were latecomers. Right. They were going into places like Australia and I think they wasted a lot of money, time and effort in that, and thank goodness they came back and got back on track in the rest of Africa. So rest of Africa will be good for them, I think, but they have to pick and choose very, very carefully.
I've run out of time, but a quick one I'm going to sneak in. Richard Brayshaw came in and said his first task was stabilizing the business. He speaks about phases. He says now he's going to be focusing on efficiencies and growth. One, do you give him a tick for the first phase, and do you believe that he's going to be able to deliver in the second phase?
Well, I give him many ticks for the first phase. I think he's done an incredible job against all odds. A lot of people wouldn't have given him much of a chance a few years ago. I think this next phase is going to be far more expensive, far more difficult. And I think Pick n Pay on a 36 times PE, it's a very, very expensive share. It's priced for perfection. There's no room for slip-ups and errors.
Price for perfection, no room for slip-ups or errors. That's me slipping up while trying to deliver that one. A very big thank you to Chris Gilmour from Absa Stockbrokers.